Remember the $1 trillion, 170-kilometer mirrored city slicing through the Saudi desert? On September 16th, it was put on trial by the 10 most powerful men in Saudi Arabia, and the verdict was death. They carved it up, distributed the assets, and left the carcass at the foot of Mount Horeb, the exact mountain where Moses talked to God. Hey, I'm Steve, this is Giga Projects, and you're watching the grand finale of our NEOM trilogy. It's not what we expected to show you, but the world moves fast. First, the cold hard facts. Not a single major contract has been awarded to NEOM in 2025. Remember in part 2 when we said the line would run out of work without new funding? Yeah, they ran out. The line's CDO Hickey and COO Pendleton have already moved to Trojena after its CEO, Philip Goulet, was let go. And those vault contractors from part 2 who begged, fund us now or kiss the 2029 Asian Games goodbye? Well, they were not properly funded, so the Olympic Committee is now in talks with China and South Korea about moving the Asian Games to those countries. Then our sources confirmed what our evidence suggested. The PIF is stopping all work on the Line, Magnum, and Sindala. Oxagon's green hydrogen plant goes to Saudi Aramco, Sindala goes to Red Sea Global, NEOM's headquarters moves to Riyadh, and thousands of international staff are being fired. The line isn't just dead, it's being erased. What you saw in part 1, the transport systems, the vertical city, the stadium floating above the chandelier, that was NEOM International staff's last hurrah, their final pitch deck before the pink slips. This feels like the opening of the movie Sunset Boulevard, where the corpse floating face down narrates how he got there. Welcome to the Autopsy of NEOM, where our corpse is still winking at us, but is mostly dead. Here's something to understand about Saudi culture. Waj, which is your face, your reputation, makes public failure worse than death. MBS will never announce the line's cancellation, not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not because he's delusional, but because he's Saudi. Which means the line will float in that pool forever, pretending to be alive while everyone pretends not to notice the bullet holes. And the most beautiful part? You took part in it. Every render you mocked, every article you shared, every comment of "it's a prison," all of that was part of the act. Because for most of its time, the line wasn't a construction project. The line was a misdirection, and like all great misdirections, it worked because we wanted to be fooled. Today, we're going to show you how MBS staged the most expensive vanishing act in construction history, how he made a $1 trillion promise disappear while delivering something nobody saw coming. And we're going to do it with the help of our very good friends Christopher Nolan and Sir Michael Caine. Welcome to The Prestige.
Every magic trick consists of 3 parts, or acts. The first part is called the pledge. The magician shows you something ordinary, a deck of cards, a bird, or a man.
اليوم بصفتي رئيس مجلس إدارة نيوم نقدم لكم ذا لاين، مدينة مليونية بطول 170 كيلو تحافظ على 95% من الطبيعة في أراضي نيوم.
What MBS announced in 2021 was brilliant. You start with the infrastructure, everybody else leaves for last. A 170-kilometer metro called the Spine, going through the nature reserve around Moses Mountain, bigger than Serengeti or Yellowstone, connecting 5 city modules: Red Sea Gateway, Hidden Marina, Community 1, Community 2, probably they would get better names at some point, and then the terminus, NEOM International Airport. Never mind, there's already another airport nearby. When you're building 5 cities and need something at the end of your metro line, you build another airport, because why not? 5 architect firms, 5 cities, each growing outward from their metro station. Urban planners loved it. It was practical and buildable and everything the line isn't today. And then MBS decided practical wasn't enough.
In my travels, I have seen the future. And it is a strange future indeed. The world, ladies and gentlemen, is on the brink of new and terrifying possibilities.
Every magician's pledge creates a reality distortion field, like that strange future that Wolverine was just talking about. In 2022, it was time to make everyone else see it too. Enter Hollywood concept artist Olivier Pron, who worked on a bunch of Marvel movies. MBS's brief to him was simple: make it worthy of Thanos. And this wasn't random. MBS grew up on Star Wars and Dune and Marvel. See, all those Star Wars and MCU references we're making on our channel, those are tongue-in-cheek explanations of the MBS playbook. So Prawn took 5 horizontal cities and folded them like a taco into one vertical megastructure. The problem is, this compression shrank the city from 170 kilometers to just 4 kilometers, 3 modules in a massive man-made harbor called the Hidden Marina. But MBS needed to grab the world's attention and keep them distracted, or his magic trick wouldn't work. So what he presented to the public combined the best of both worlds: the 170-kilometer line from the original metro and a 500-meter walls from Prawn's design. The line wasn't just ambitious, it defied physics, economics, and common sense. It was pure fantasy. 2 parallel glass walls creating a canyon of mirrors 500 meters tall with a floating stadium and underground transit at 350 kilometers per hour. It's impossible to build, and it's perfect for headlines.
He shows you this object. Perhaps he asks you to inspect it, to see that it is indeed real. But of course, it probably isn't.
Here's what MBS knew from day one. There's no way he could stay within his means and still accomplish his goals. He needed access to all of the wealth that Saudi Arabia had to offer. And standing in his way was the Saudi Public Investment Fund. So here's how public investment funds are supposed to work. You bank all of your oil money, you invest it globally, and you live off the returns forever. The one sacred rule is you never touch the principal. You can only spend the interest, which is about $50 billion a year. Now, 50 billion sounds massive until you price MBS's shopping list. His solution was pretty audacious. Stop calling them projects, start calling them investments. Because investments can tap the principal. That's not spending, that's just reallocation of assets. Now, the PIF isn't stupid, so they said there was 2 ways he could do this. The first was find co-investors to split the costs and the risk. This worked at Oxagon's hydrogen plant, a joint venture between Air Products, Aquapower, and NEOM, so MBS just needed to make it work for the line. They advertised their commitment to the project with what we're calling the Big Ditch. A trench across a desert, perfectly straight, 50 meters wide, up to 5 meters deep, and 120,000 meters long. It's so big you can see it from space. This right here is a view from the eastern end at the airport. As you can see in this time lapse, from September 2022 to April 24, they spent hundreds of millions on what they told engineers was the foundation for the spine metro, connecting NEOM International Airport with the Cantilever, a place which was never formally announced and existed only in the NEOM homepage. Now, when we visited in 2024, it was biblical. Endless lines of trucks and excavators. This is how it looked in the Sharma Valley. And this over here is how it looked on the construction side of NEOM International Airport. But here's what we discovered when we returned in 2025. Everything was deserted. Not abandoned, wrapped up, like a movie set after filming's over. Look, you don't dig the foundation of a 150-kilometer railway from nowhere A to nowhere B in 18 months and then just pack it up. Real infrastructure doesn't work that way. Marketing does. But the important question is, did it work? Well, boy, howdy, did it! It got tens of thousands of news articles, YouTubes, and Twitter feeds. This was exactly the point. This was the world's longest billboard advertising to investors. Look, we're really doing this. And the investors, they loved it. 50 hedge funds invested hundreds of billions of dollars. Nah, just joking. Nobody showed up. The Big Ditch was a big swing and a miss. And when the investors didn't bite, the construction crews, they just packed up. And now MBS had to try something else.
The second act is called the turn. The magician takes the ordinary something and makes it do something extraordinary.
The NEOM version of the turn? Making a $700 billion petroleum fund pay for $500 billion in dreams. And that's not even counting the line. The second way the PIF said that they could treat the gigaprojects as investments is if they return the same rates as their current investments. If you can't find partners, you gotta show profits. And that's when the real illusion began. According to the Wall Street Journal's deep dive into a 100-page audit of Trojena,
we call it a mutual dance of delusion. The Crown Prince would go to the people running NEOM and say, I want completely crazy architecture that defies what we know about how buildings are built.
And while that was happening, the PIF demanded an IRR of 9% for ultra-luxury hotels when 4% is the industry average. NEOM's management got caught in the middle, so they did what any middle management would do when facing impossible demands. They hired consultants. In 2021, they made a $300 million call to McKinsey, who brought in PwC, and together they cooked the books so thoroughly that Gordon Ramsay would have been impressed. Here's how.
So you can see this with Trojena. In this fall 2023 document we have, you can see that they had a glamping site.
Glamping, like this is sort of, what do they call it? Glamorous camping, like sort of fancy tents.
Yeah, and they originally were estimating that they'd get $216 a night. Well, after costs went up, they looked at it closer and said, well, actually, we're readjusting that to $704 a night.
How widespread was this practice?
It was common. We've talked to a lot of people who took part in it.
Every Saudi gigaproject cooked the books because 9% IRR is mathematically impossible. Take Shura Island with its signature coral bloom concept. Let's imagine you put $100 million into building one of the 11 Foster-designed hotels which are about to open. The IRR is interest, so 9%, and is calculated over the 15 years from the day you invest your money. That means 5 years ago. Once it opens on a half-finished island, you'll spend another 5 years troubleshooting operations and paying influencers to TikTok your resort as the next Maldives. So that leaves just 5 years to somehow return $256 million on that $100 million investment. And the only way this works on a virgin destination is to assume a $10,000 a night booked solid year-round. And that's never going to happen. But this is exactly what happened in the books on neighboring Shabara Island. And you know what they got on top? MBS as the architect. Here's John Pagano, the CEO of Red Sea Global, explaining the design process.
We had to start from scratch. I learned as we started the process, His Royal Highness is very intimately involved in, the design process, where he wanted to create something that was very different to anything else in the world. We did design more conventional hotels, and he didn't like them, and again, he kept emphasizing, I want something that has never been seen before, which is, if you think about it, very difficult, right? Extraordinarily difficult.
But Pagano and architect Sean Killa kept iterating until MBS got what he wanted. Shimmering mirror domes floating on the water like the impound yard of Area 51. E.T. phone home, right? The result? 100 million TikTok views. Meanwhile, right next door, Foster & Partners St. Regis and Najuma by Kengo Kuma barely broke 10 million. Let that sink in. MBS is crushing Foster and Kuma, the world's greatest architects, 100 million in one. And you know what's never been seen before? Guests pay 50% extra just to sleep inside their TikTok video. But now the reality check. After launching at the delusional $10,000 a night, MBS's viral Orbs still only command $3,000. And Foster & Kuma, that's $2,000. Same amenities, $1,000 difference for viral architecture. The Pagano interview happened at Desert Rock, another MBS monument carved out of bare rock. Let's watch how he navigated the dance of delusion.
So we weren't trying to copy the Maldives or the Seychelles or Dubai. He wanted something that was quintessentially Saudi.
Let's decode MBS's brief. He wanted Tatooine from Star Wars. Just look at George Lucas's Star Wars locations in Tunisia. That's ancient desert architecture. And Uncle Owen's Moisture Farm was an actual hotel carved from rock.
he's attracted to things that are, never been seen before. I mean, desert rock is another, manifestation of that.
Hotel rooms carved into a granite mountain, that's Uncle Owen's moisture farm reimagined. Jabba's palace is Jean Nouvel's Sharon Reserve at Alula, where a mountain is hollowed into a sanctuary of pure rock and sculpted light. Diriyah Gate, the original Saudi capital, is being restored from ruins. It's got adobe walls, shaded sikas, working wind catchers. This is Tatooine. But NEOM thought bigger meant better, so they promised Coruscant. And here's the thing, even Tatooine is brutal to build.
I looked at Alula and thought, okay, the Nabateans built those tombs 2,000 years ago with their hands. How difficult can it be, right? Well, that mountain there is not sandstone like it is in Alula. This is hard granite. And so when we tried to excavate into the rock to create the units and so on, we were breaking equipment.
Pagano ended up carving just one floor into the granite itself. That's enough for TikTok, and then he built regular apartments around it. Now look at the original from Jean Nouvel.
C'est le principe du puits, c'est un puits de lumière, mais enfin c'est la même chose. Et puis on a la conscience d'une échelle tout à fait différente.
And this is NEOM's copy, Aquellum, which just got axed for being a money crematorium. You know what's funny? The Royal Commission of Alula will carve one entrance into the sandstone, call it Jabba's palace, build Mos Espa villages around it, and still claim they're building Jean Nouvel's Sharon.
I think one of the other things we learned is if I show His Royal Highness something and he likes it, he expects that I can deliver it.
Pagano's rule, guarantee delivery whatever the cost. For the wooden architecture at Najuma and St. Regis, he went Swiss with Bloomer Lehmann. That's like buying a Patek Philippe to hammer nails. Was that absurd? Maybe. All three resorts opened 2 months early. In Saudi construction, that's delivering a unicorn. And when you're racing against NEOM for first delivery, that's priceless. Because NEOM's Sindala Island, also due November 2024, arrived 75% complete and 300% over budget. And that's what triggered NEOM's executive purge and handed Sindala to John Pagano. Here's why.
We didn't hire external consultants to come and be the delivery and the developer. We're the developer.
NEOM started expat-heavy, delivery-focused. But Saudi CEO Nadmi al-Nasser also institutionalized something that we could call the Saudi disease, where you hire consultants to protect your waj, not to solve problems. And when the project fails, you then can fire the consultant publicly and keep your waj intact. But Nadmi al-Nasser went further. Engineers who said this is impossible were fired. Managers who delivered were poached by Red Sea Global. This is how NEOM became a dream factory with no delivery department. And what's worse, Pagano understood what NEOM never did. They had two masters. For MBS, he built viral monuments. And for the PIF, he built money printers like Lahek Island.
And today we were honored with His Excellency Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who is the governor of the Public Investment Fund.
Yes, this is the guy who killed the line in NEOM. Today he's celebrating what NEOM should have been because Red Sea Global actually delivers.
Lahek is the first opportunity that many people will have to own a home on an island in the Red Sea.
There's no promises of zero gravity, desert punk living. No, we just have 500 villas and 220 condos to sell, and you too can own a home.
So we came up with this idea of what if we created a
growing system, a light touch development, a series of repeatable modules, garden modules that weave throughout the development, and it's all about living immersed in nature.
This might need a translation. Light touch and repeatable modules means they can build these villas for 500 grand and sell them for 5 million. Pagano understood that a 9% rate of return works only when you sell real estate. So he's developing Saudi pristine coastline, selling it off plan to millionaires and banking super profits. The Shabara Orbs, that's the loss leader that gets you in the door. The Shura and Lahek villages, that's where he makes his money back. Elliot Brown's mutual dance of delusion implies that MBS, the PIF, and NEOM were equally delusional. But looking at Pagano makes you think delusion was entirely NEOM's. It makes you think everyone was dancing on Tatooine while NEOM was trying to dance on Coruscant. But was it?
Now, You're looking for the secret, but you won't find it. Because, of course, you're not really looking. You don't really want to know. You want to be fooled.
And fooled we were. For 3 years, everyone played along, the consultants, the executives, the PIF, until March 2024 when the music stopped, the spreadsheet sobered up, half of NEOM's leadership was fired, and the consultancies were blacklisted. And when the PIF's hand-picked auditors finally uncooked the books, they buried the real damage in the footnotes of their annual report. Their gigaproject holdings, valued at 241 billion rial, or about $64 billion in 2023, fell to just 211 billion rial, or $56 billion in 2024, despite pouring in billions throughout the year. The annual report also mentions a mysterious $44 billion write-off with zero explanation. Let's reverse engineer the real numbers. The method one is the PIF's own math. That's $56 billion at the end of 2024, a $44 billion write-off, and so the total invested is $100 billion. According to Emirates NBD and Mead projects, $81 billion in construction contracts were awarded across the big 5 gigaprojects, and about $20 billion were given to smaller gigaprojects, and the total there is again $100 billion. Now let's add the likely write-offs. Diriyah has some expensive hotels, so they're going to write off about $4 billion. Roshan, the real estate developer, they're doing fine, zero write-offs. Qiddiya, the theme parks will print money, zero write-offs. Red Sea has some pricey monuments, so about $4 billion in write-offs. Scattered across the smaller gigaprojects, we think about $6 billion in write-offs. So the other $30 billion must be NEOM. So let's look at NEOM's write-offs. The infrastructure, that's $11 billion for the workers' communities, plus about $4 billion for the canceled spine tunnel, that's a complete loss. Oxagon, $11 billion for a floating port city plus a green hydrogen plant, and this year they built this giant wind park and a giant solar farm. They sold NEOM's shares worth $4 billion to Saudi Aramco, and the rest of Oxagon, the port expansion and strategic investments, continue, about $6 billion. Trojena, they spent about $9 billion to build an artificial lake and ski slopes, and the write-off will be about $5 billion. Sindala Island, for about $3 billion, is a complete loss. Magna, $1 billion for Aquellum, also a complete loss. And finally, the Line, the mother of all write-offs, where they've spent $390 billion on the megalopolis of the future. Oh, wait, my bad. I'm sorry, I misread that. The audit revealed each module of the Line would cost $130 billion, not the $50 billion it was budgeted at, so it would take $390 billion to do the 3 modules planned in the first phase, and that full 170-kilometer dream with the marketing renders would cost $8.8 trillion. That's the GDP of the Middle East and all of the rest of the continent of Africa. But even if they didn't outspend a whole continent, they still spent a crazy amount of money, right? I mean, this is their big showpiece. Give me a second and I'll do some math. Okay, so it's that plus that times that, carry the 1, and then, Well, this brings us to the shocking revelation. They've only spent $5 billion on the Line itself. $5 billion. The Line is disappearing before our very eyes.
But you wouldn't clap yet. Because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back.
Let's face it, the PIF has won on all fronts. They've written NEOM down from $40 billion to essentially nothing. Maybe $10 billion remains viable on Trojena and Oxagon, and the rest of NEOM is declared worthless, sold, or condemned to a state of cryosleep. And despite MBS's grand ambitions, the PIF kept total giga-project spending at exactly $100 billion over 5 years, never touching the principal, operating within their means the whole time. But MBS had one more card hidden up his sleeve. We're calling it the deadline doctrine. While the books were still cooking, MBS entered into international contracts that had firm commitments. Every international deadline put pressure on the PIF to keep making it rain. In 2029, they're scheduled to host the Asian Winter Games in Trojena, with contracts signed with the International Olympic Committee. In 2030, the Riyadh Expo, with agreements signed with 180 countries. And in 2034, the FIFA World Cup, with 11 stadiums promised to 1 billion fans, and an agreement with FIFA that allows the hooligans to ignore local laws, take over, and build whatever they want, and stick Saudi with the bill. But it wasn't a blank check. The PIF tried to fight back with value engineering. Architects speak for make it cheaper. By June 2025, their desperation went public.
What we understand is that an RFP has been sent to consulting firms that have been looking at the project for the past, 7-8 years. Based on the multiple sources that we've spoken to, NEOM has commissioned this RFP to look at the feasibility of the line as it currently stands. One big element, Jumana, that NEOM is asking for is to look at commercializing aspects of the city and how it could turn into something that makes business sense.
Think about that. They put an open bounty on the line. Find something, anything that could be downsized, commercialized, or salvaged. And the likely answer was nothing. Because MBS designed everything to be unshrinkable through all or nothing propositions.
Remember what we said in part 2 about building the line? You can only unplug the gap and flood the marina after you've built the raft foundations, basements, and supercores of all 3 modules.
Only then can they fill the marina for cruise ships to sail in. So let's be clear, there's no phasing that first gigantic footprint, because building just one lone module would look less like a revolution and much more like a very expensive mirrored donkey shed. So the bare minimum, the stripped down starter pack, means everything in those mega tenders plus the primary decks and a full wrap of mirror glass for 3 modules. You can't build one wall now and another later, because then the FIFA stadium would hang in mid-air like Wile E. Coyote, realizing gravity isn't optional. The same applies for reducing the height, because the stadium is above the chandelier. Remember District 4 and MBS's Trillionaire Palace from Part 1? According to the Wall Street Journal, NEOM staff begged MBS, please reduce it from 500 to 300 meters, and that would save billions. MBS told the board this was inappropriate and that cost savings should be found elsewhere. Every practical option dies because MBS designed it that way. He was both the line's creator and its destroyer. And we say MBS because all or nothing propositions are well known in politics and negotiation, but unknown in architecture for a good reason. Architects have no leverage. The building doesn't exist yet. You can't threaten people by holding a rendering hostage. When MBS gave the PIF the ultimatum, build everything or build nothing, he forgot that nothing is always cheaper than something. Like the line, Trojena's Kraken and Vault were designed to be unshrinkable. We call this the Kraken because Ski Village is a serious misnomer. The Kraken is one of the largest buildings on the planet, featuring a skiable rooftop with 2.3 kilometers of slopes as its tentacles. It's Saudi Arabia's first supersized building, and it's visibly going vertical. As you can see, they made huge progress over the last 6 months. The structural skeleton is already complete in some sections, with the skiable rooftop already installed. The Kraken was designed to be impervious to value engineering because even at 2,400 meters elevation, it's not reliably cold enough for a decent 3-month ski season. So the Kraken is essentially a giant slope-shaped refrigerator with a ski resort underneath. NEOM's USP was breakfast by the sea, lunch in the mountains. That promise required unprecedented infrastructure. Visitors would arrive at the Mirage Visitor Center on the lower plateau, then take the time travel tunnel 3.8 kilometers up to the Vault. This massive transit hub, which is 2 interconnected buildings 200 meters high, 864 meters long, would contain apartments, hotels, and a shopping mall. Remember those contractors from Part 2 with their desperate pleas, act now or kiss the Asian Games goodbye? According to their timeline, they should be pouring the raft foundations and erecting the massive steel cores now. But they're standing still. They're still stuck back in May while we're in November. The PIF awarded those contracts, but according to Vault contractors that we've talked to, the PIF ordered them to slow walk. Keep building, keep workers on site, but build at a glacial speed. When the Olympic Committee heard about the slowdown, they immediately saw the implications. A ski resort with no way to move people around? So they started making quiet calls. Hey, China, Korea, anyone interested in hosting the 2029 Asian Games? In August, the Korean Olympic Committee leaked the story to the press. Saudi Arabia cannot get their shit together. MBS thought he was playing 4D chess. The PIF just flipped the board. They sabotaged the Asian Games to escape the deadline doctrine. If there's no Olympics, there's no deadlines. No deadline, no leverage. Here's the corpus delicti. It says NEOM's Trojena ski village project will be reopened for the main tender. To put that in plain English, the PIF is starting over, and the 2029 Asian Games will not be happening in Trojena. It's likely Saudi's hosting will be postponed to 2033, so let the value engineering begin. The Kraken's frozen tentacles? One slope will do. The vault and public transit? Please, this is Saudi Arabia. We have G-Wagons. Look at the PIF's vision for Trojena. See all that green? That's grass for golf courses where MBS wanted ice. Repeat Pagano's playbook. Carpet Moses Mountain with luxury chalets, championship fairways, and most importantly, temperate grass that doesn't need a nuclear plant to stay alive. MBS offered the world's largest refrigerator. The PIF offered green. On a mountain where God once spoke, that choice matters more than you might think. What we just witnessed on September 16th wasn't a snap decision. It was the final act of Game of Thrones, but with spreadsheets. To understand what really happened, you need to remember that Riyadh is full of royals who remember when MBS was just one of 1,000 princes. We'll call them the Old Guard. Business leaders who knew King Salman when he was the governor of Riyadh. For years, they backed MBS's vision, not because they loved mirror cities, but because they agreed with his diagnosis and his cure for what ails Saudi Arabia, which I will tell you in a minute. But when the bills came due, when expensive become existential, they struck. They poisoned their adversary's power base with audits. First, they got MBS to fire his own visionaries by making them look incompetent. By fall 2024, the contrast became undeniable. Red Sea Global opened early to acclaim, while Sandala limped across the line, way over budget, and riddled with quality problems. That performance gap was the final nail in NEOM's coffin, triggering the management purge. Soon after, the PIF's audit chief, Mike Chung, set up shop in NEOM, and then came the audits and the write-offs and the strategic reviews, which technically followed MBS's orders while systematically destroying his dream within 9 months. The September 16th decision was just MBS signing the death certificate for something the PIF had already killed. But here's what our Westerner brains can't process. Why would they sabotage the Asian Games? Forget the money, this is about Waj. Failing to host the games isn't just embarrassing MBS, it's humiliating Saudi Arabia in front of all of Asia. The FIFA World Cup is even worse. Why announce NEOM as a host city just to scrap it 1 year later? Sure, they can move it to Al Ula, but it's a catastrophic loss of face that they should have avoided at all costs. Drop your theories below, especially if you're a local, because this is one part of the magic trick that we haven't figured out yet. Is that the prestige? Has this magic trick failed like Siegfried and Roy's last show with the PIF being the tiger? Is that too soon? That feels too soon. No, it's not. That wasn't the prestige. We've told you the what and the how, but we haven't told you the why. Because building the buildings was never the point. They were the magician's left hand keeping you distracted while his right hand was performing the real trick.
You have to bring it back. That's why every magic trick has a third act. The hardest part. The part we call the prestige.
While we were focused on the impossible architecture, Saudi Arabia was rebuilding itself from the inside out. The buildings were never the trick. The trick was using the buildings to transform an entire civilization. Here's what actually happened in 2022 at what we call the Thanos moment.
Avengers! Assemble.
When Olivier Prone dropped those impossible renders, something clicked inside MBS. The line was never meant to be built. It was meant to be the perfect cover for what no Saudi ruler had dreamed of in 80 years.
Annual holiday decided by royal decree last month marks the day in 1727 when Mohammed bin Saud, founder of the first Saudi state, rose to prominence after taking over the emirate of Diriyah. This is 17 years before what historians consider as the beginning of the Saudi state, when bin Saud forged an alliance with Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab.
So now they're taking that date even earlier and in effect removing Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab from the story.
Wahhabism is a purist doctrine of Islam and has governed the fabric of Saudi society for decades.
3 centuries of extremist religious doctrine deleted. And MBS was pretty blunt about why.
اليوم ما نقدر ننمو، ما نقدر نجذب رؤوس أموال، ما نقدر نعمل سياحة، ما نقدر نتقدم بوجود فكر متطرف في المملكة العربية السعودية. إذا تبغى ملايين الوظائف، إذا تبغى البطالة تنزل، إذا تبغى الاقتصاد ينمو، إذا تبغى دخلك يتحسن، يجب أن تستأصل هذا المشروع لمصلحة دنيوية.
MBS's approval rating jumped to 80% after he erased Wahhabism, not despite it because of it. But the real prestige wasn't just deleting an old ideology, it was what grew up in its place. Here's Rory Jones.
In 2023, for the first time, 50% of Saudi Arabia's real GDP came from sources other than oil. It's sort of like as MBS was trying to build NEOM, this new place where anything was possible, the rest of Saudi Arabia has actually become more like NEOM, the place that he was dreaming of.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I think MBS has really initiated a bunch of changes in the rest of the kingdom that mean the raison d'etre for NEOM, isn't as strong.
So what will become of NEOM? Well, it's not going to go away because MBS has tied his reputation to it. But here's what survival mode looks like.
So you have a budget, and the budget is clear.
We're working. The budget evolves every day, by the way.
Budget evolves every day? That means they're still fighting for money. Heck, NEOM didn't even make it into Saudi's 2026 budget after 3 years of top billing. Remember the corpse floating in the pool still blinking at us? In Saudi culture, you don't announce failure, you just announce a new strategic partnership with Red Sea and elevate Pagano to NEOM's board. NEOM's got the brand, Red Sea's got the builders, and Pagano's gonna run it. Start with Sindala and end with everything. And we mean everything. Pagano just freaking announced expanding to Italy after MBS granted him Saudi citizenship. That means Sindala's not a job, it's Pagano's entrance exam for a tourism empire that won't stop at Saudi borders. But there's one mystery we haven't solved. Why there? Of all the places in Saudi Arabia to stage this $1 trillion magic trick, why choose that specific patch of desert?
The presently accepted location of the mountain being the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt has been debated by many scholars. The early chapters of Exodus tell us in fact that Mount Sinai is in Midian, which is in Saudi Arabia.
The NEOM region used to be called Midian. It's where a young exiled Egyptian prince, you might have heard of him, Moses? He's called Musa to locals.
You are safe here, Egyptian.
And he spent a decade in apprenticeship to the prophet Shuaib, learning the ancient ways of the Force before his greater calling. The ancient Egyptians knew the nomads here as the Shashu of Yahweh. That's right, this is the first time God's holiest name appears in recorded history together with a zip code. So the Abrahamic God is technically a NEOM local.
When we speak of a certain mountain, we usually mean a specific peak. But people of the ancient Middle East did not think of that. When the Bible refers to Horeb as the mountain of God, think mountain range rather than a specific peak.
That's Jebel al-Lawz, also known as Mount Horeb.
For the place whereon thou standest is holy ground.
For 35 centuries, this has been holy ground, where Moses met the burning bush, Elijah heard God whisper, and where a young Saudi prince, far from the throne, sought his own revelation. According to Rory Jones, young MBS hiked on Mount Horeb and then built his royal palace there. And now he's upgrading God's infrastructure.
Lesia rises where believers place the 12 springs of Elim. Trojena's entry point, the Mirage, sits a stone's throw from the split rock where Moses struck water. The time travel tunnel replaces dusty pilgrimage paths, whisking tourists up to the vault, then up to the 340-meter Discovery Tower, because apparently even divine Wi-Fi needs a range extender. And between it all, something unexpected. NEOM fenced off 3 massive strips of land to create their nature reserve. Just by keeping out sheep and camels, the desert started healing itself. Actual grass cover where there has been only sand. And on top of natural recovery, they've planted 1.5 million native trees across 20 square kilometers, terraforming barren desert into dry savanna. Once it started to flourish, they stocked it with better-looking wildlife. We saw the proof firsthand. Ostriches, curious enough to investigate our windows, sand gazelles, Nubian ibexes, Arabian oryxes, all of them thriving. They even plan to reintroduce Asian cheetahs and Arabian leopards as soon as the prey population grows large enough. While the world debated mirror walls and robot deliveries, the old guard inside the PIF helped MBS delete 3 centuries of religious law. On September 16th, they checked their work. Wahhabism dead? Check. Society transformed? Check. So it's time to stop paying for the world's most expensive prop. The line is dead. Long live the line. Because here's the thing about expensive funerals. They're not for the dead, they're for the living. MBS spent $100 billion on a funeral for Wahhabism. The line was just the world's most breathtaking coffin. And on September 16th, the PIF finally buried it, both of them. Mountains have been moved. Deserts have been rewilded. Lakes are being conjured out of nothing, while futures are being decided. And here's a crazy thought. What if God was tired of desert beige? What if he just wanted a better view? What if he was tired of people using him as a justification for social oppression? And what if, for the first time in a very, very long time, someone was bold enough, rich enough, and maybe just crazy enough to try and change things for him? If that's blasphemy, hit the comments. If it's prophecy, hit subscribe. As always, I am Steve, this is Gigaprojects, and I'll see you on Mount Horeb, where apparently God's got better Wi-Fi than NEOM ever will.